Welcome to Inspiration and Transformation from the Banks of the Ganga with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, an American sannyasi living at the Parmarth Niketan ashram in Rishikesh, India. Sadhvi is president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to women and children. Sadhvi is also Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival. Join the musings of an American sannyasi as Sadhvi shares the wisdom and teachings of her guru, His Holiness Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswati Ji.
Welcome everyone to Inspiration and Transformation from the holy banks of the sacred Ganga River in the land of Rishikesh, India. Can you have a relationship with someone if you are unable to forgive that person? Well, you can't have a deep relationship with someone if you're holding on to a grudge against them. Because that grudge, of course, becomes a wall between us and them. And a deep relationship is one in which we connect. One in which it's my soul connecting with your soul, not my body and your body. And if what I'm doing is holding a grudge against you, well, the grudge obviously isn't against your soul. I don't have any grudges against your soul. My grudge would be against what your body did, what your body said. Nobody's soul betrays us or cheats us or harms us or abuses us. So a grudge that I'm holding is a grudge of my body-mind against your body-mind and what it's done or what it's said. Which means that I'm living this relationship body-mind to body-mind. So yes, I can have a relationship, but it's not going to be a very deep one. In order to have a deep relationship, a meaningful relationship, we have to go soul-soul. And in order to do that, I have to get out of the clutches of my grudge. I have to be able to connect with your soul, which I'm not going to be able to do if my mind is saying, but he said that, he did that, how can you possibly, blah, blah, blah. If my mind is playing that with me, I'm not going to be able to connect with your soul. So I have to get free of that. But what I would say is, if you've got a grudge against someone, don't wait to go back into a relationship with them. Don't say, well, I'm going to work this out first and then I'll be able to come back to you. Because sitting on your own couch, it's going to be very difficult to work out. It's actually going to be a lot easier if you are able to maintain a relationship with that person, because what that's going to do is it's going to keep giving you opportunities to connect with them soul to soul. Okay, I blew it an hour ago. I've got another chance now. Blew it 5 minutes ago. I've got another chance. And to keep seeing that person, to keep giving myself the opportunity to see that person as soul, as consciousness, rather than as the body and the mistake they made. And of course, as I keep living in a relationship with them, I'm going to see them as someone bigger than whatever they did that I'm holding a grudge against. So I'm going to start to be able to see them as more multifaceted, multi-layered. I'm going to be able to see more of the person and not just the mistake. If I separate myself from that person and I sit alone, all that goes through my head is what they did over and over and over again, and I just replay that. But if I force myself to continually face that person over and over again, then I'm going to be face to face with new things they're doing, with the entire humanity of that person. And if I'm doing it honestly, then I'm going to be able to see also wonderful things they're doing. Because nobody's all bad. And so if I'm staying in a relationship with them, slowly, if I'm doing it honestly, and if I'm doing it with a commitment to eventually get to soul, eventually to see the being through whom the mistake happened, but who isn't the mistake. And that's the important distinction. I remember when Puja Swamiji and I went to visit a jail in California several years ago. We were there giving a spiritual talk to all the prisoners, and the bottom line message that Puja Swamiji really wanted them all to have was, you're not the crime. Crime was committed by you, yes, but the crime is this much and you are this much. Yeah, you've got to serve your time. Simply knowing that isn't going to get you out earlier. But in your own self-concept, in how you think about yourself, rather than moving through every minute of every day based on murderer, robber, rapist, this, that, move through every day as soul. Soul in a body, through which body this crime was committed, this mistake happened. But I'm not the mistake. So that we don't define ourselves like that. And in the same way, we shouldn't define others like that. And so the more open we are to have a relationship with them, the deeper and bigger and broader our picture of them can be. But it's hard. It's a lot easier to just say, I don't want to see your face. And we may need to do that for a few hours or a few days until we're able to get a control of ourselves so that we don't say something we regret or do something we regret. But separation is never the answer. It's always about, how can I bring my consciousness into this moment, into this situation, rather than push it away from me.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Alaya, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Hi, this is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. Help is just a call or click away through the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Please call 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or visit rain.org, that's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
Welcome back to Inspiration and Transformation. I'm so glad to have you all back here with me. How can you find the bravery to make a decision that might alter the path that you have been on in life? Well, it's important to distinguish bravery from impulsiveness. Bravery or courage, which we speak about a lot in here, is courage is open-heartedness. which is preferable to bravery. Bravery is that, and actually I'm going back to the etymology of the words. Bravery is that which I'm able to have because I am armored or protected. Bravery arises out of the fact that there's a steel metal plate between me and the enemy, or because I've got a spear of 20 feet between me and the enemy, or I've got a steel mask on my head. Courage is the opposite. We use them as synonyms, but it's actually the opposite. Courage stems from having an open heart. The end result is the same. A fearlessness, but it's a fearlessness due to being open, rather than a fearlessness due to being separate and protected. So I'm going to shift the question into how do we find the courage to make that decision. But again, it's crucial to distinguish courage from impulsiveness, because a lot of times along the path of our life, there are moments that come up to all of us in which we say, enough, forget it, my God, I've had it, I hate it. Forget it all. This is what so many of us, we talk about midlife crises and so many people who abandon families and careers and what they've dedicated their lives to because something happens. Some of it's hormonal, some of it's psychological, some of it's practical. And you end up with people who, some actually do, some just are tempted to, literally abandon everything that they've had in their lives in that moment. And so it's important that we distinguish, and I'm not saying that that's never a good decision, but I would say that it happens a lot more frequently than the frequency in which it actually is a good decision. And there's many, many times in which people look back and think, oh my God, what did I do? So courage is something that needs to come out of contemplation. It needs to come out of meditation. It needs to come not from a place of impulsiveness, not from a place of instinctive passion in the moment. Because the truth is, if it's real and it's right for me, if changing this path of my life is right for me, it's still going to be right tomorrow. And it's still going to be right next week. And I owe it to myself, to everything I've worked for, to the relationships I've built, to the values I've held, to give it a day or a week, to meditate on it. Any instinct that says, no, there's no time to meditate on this, gotta do it fast, chances are is not a good decision. The good decisions are the ones that withstand the test of, I've meditated on this, I've contemplated on this, in some cases I've cried on this because I know what it's going to do to my loved ones. But despite all of that, it continues to be the right choice. And in that case, it's courage. It's a heart that's open. So it's not a decision. Another way to know is it's not a decision pushing something away. So it's not about, I've got to get out of here. I have no idea where I'm going. I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I got to get out of here. That's just pushing something away. Whereas when something's right, it's pulling us toward it. And that's a really important and good way to know whether what we're doing is something that really is right for us versus we're just running away from a situation that is difficult on our ego, that's difficult on our patience, that's difficult on our compassion, that's difficult on our resolve, that's more work than we had anticipated, internal work, outer work, is if it's the I gotta get out of here experience. chances are the best thing to do is to sit there. But if it's something from outside that's actually directly pulling, knowing that's where I'm supposed to go, that's the door I'm supposed to walk through, that's the path I'm supposed to be on. These things happen in life. It happened to me. It's happened to other people. You're walking down one path, you think it's the right path, and then suddenly a whole nother path opens. A door flies open. And the light on the other side of that door is so bright that you know that is where I'm supposed to walk. But again, it withstands the day, the week, the months of meditation, of contemplation, of thinking about it. But it's not pushing away. It's moving toward. And when we've got to move toward something, we do it with courage, with the open heart, and a heart that is aware of the fact that it may cause pain. A heart that's aware of the fact that it's a sacrifice. Not a heart that's closed off from that. I don't want to hear about it, it's not my problem, it's your problem. That's not courage. It's also not bravery. It's selfishness and fear. And that's how you know that it's me who can't handle this and me who's pushing this away rather than actually a correct path that has opened in front of me.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. What should I do if I can't introvert myself even after so many spiritual practices? Why am I not getting forward? So I think what he means by not able to introvert himself is probably not able to go within, not able to still the mind, not able to connect with that part inside of ourselves. And he says, of course, even after so many spiritual practices. And sometimes the effort with which we do the practice can actually end up being the impediment to the goal we're looking for. And that sounds backwards, I know. But when we remember that this ultimate goal is connecting with who we are. So it's not about becoming something new. It's not about learning some new skill that is outside of me. It's not about, being born in India and learning to speak Greek that you've never heard of. It's not about being born and then learning how to play basketball. Things that you've never been exposed to. It's not that. It's simply removing that which is not self and reconnecting to the self. So there shouldn't need to be any very complex, esoteric, difficult techniques to know the self. We need to do something because we are so wrapped up in the not self. We're so wrapped up in the body, in the world around us, in our relationships. But if what we're focused on so much is the technique, is the practice, then it's no wonder I'm not able to connect deeply within. And that happens sometimes, ironically, is all my attention, all my focus goes on the technique instead of on, well, where's the technique supposed to take me? What's the end goal here? There's a great story that I love of these 3 guys who are stranded on an island, and they're scared and worried, of course, they're going to die. And they pray and pray that someone should rescue them. And one day they open their eyes and there's this canoe on the shore. And they're ecstatic and they jump in the canoe and they row themselves back to the mainland. And a few weeks later, someone sees them walking through the market. And they've got this canoe on their head. They're walking in a line holding the canoe on their heads. And the person says, "Why are you carrying a canoe on your head?" They said, "Oh, well, you know, this canoe, it saved our life. We were stranded on the island, and this canoe, it showed up, and it saved us." And the person said, "Well, that's great, but why are you carrying it on your head through the marketplace?" And again, they said, "Well, God, you know, this canoe, it saved our life, and we were stranded, and we're so indebted to this canoe." And the reason that I love the story is, yeah, the canoe saved their life. It's great. It was a miracle of grace. But now it's fulfilled its job. The point of the canoe was to get them across the water back to the mainland. To continue to carry a canoe on your head, walking through the marketplace, makes no sense. And it actually ends up handicapping you. Because there's not much you can do when you've got both your arms up and you're carrying a canoe. And the same thing happens a lot with our attachment to specific practices or specific techniques, is it becomes about the practice. It becomes about the technique rather than being about where we're going. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter whether it was a canoe. It could have been anything. It could have been a raft. It could have been jet skis. It could have been a rowboat. It could have been a yacht. I mean, it doesn't matter what vehicle it was. What matters is they were able to use it to get across. And the same is true with our spiritual meditation techniques. It's about getting us back to the self. But if we're so focused on the technique, then rather than becoming one with the self, we're becoming one with the technique. Like these guys became so one with their canoe that now they, carried it with them through the marketplace. And so if you find that you're not moving forward, ask yourself, well, how much have I merged with my true self versus how much have I merged with a technique? How much have I merged with a stringent practice rather than with myself? And can I soften that? Can I bring some just awareness? Loving awareness if I've got the heart for it. Open-hearted, spacious awareness. Into that space. Because physics tells us the universe hates a vacuum. So where space is created, something goes in to fill it. And the same thing happens in our meditation and our spiritual practice. The more space we're able to create, the more we're able to get out of the way. Get our minds out of the way, get our thoughts out of the way, get our egos out of the way, get our shopping lists out of the way. The more we're able to get them out of the way, the more space is created. And into that space, grace flows. And so if that space is so occupied by, I've got to remember the technique in which I lost count. What number was I on? That's now what's occupying my space. How many times I'm supposed to chant my mantra, how many breaths, what count of the inhalation, what count of the exhalation. I mean, they're beautiful techniques. But like the canoe, they're techniques to just take us across the water. Not techniques for us to get stuck into. And ultimately the goal is just, how can I create space in which who I really am, that truth can emerge. Because it's there. We don't need to do something fancy or esoteric in order to make it there. It's already there. What we need is some assistance removing the stuff that blocks it from our vision. And that's the ego, and that's the illusion, and that's the expectations, and that's the anger, and that's our grudges, and that's all this stuff. So that's what the techniques help us do. But you don't want to substitute one thing that's filling your mind for another thing that's filling your mind, because in either case the mind is full. And really what we want to do is create stillness and space. And so for my brother online who's asking this question, I'd say, don't worry for a moment about the practice. You mentioned you've done so many practices. Take a break from the practice and just sit with the self. Just go within. Allow that space to be created and see what flows into it.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. We've taken sannyas. What does that mean? What does the orange mean? And then the second part of the question has to do with gurus and how do we explain to our friends, living abroad, that we have a guru. What does that mean, really, in a way that, we know what it means inside of us, but what does it mean in a way that we can share with our friends? Sannyas is actually a very literal, very specific rite of passage and initiation. The vows of sannyas are very much like vows of renunciation in any tradition. So it's the equivalent, really, of being a monk or being a nun. Vows of celibacy, vows of simplicity, vows of renunciation. But the ritual of it, it's actually something into which one gets ordained by the guru. It's not like you just wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to be a sannyasi. You could certainly wake up and say, I'm going to abide by that. You could wake up and say, I'm going to live by this. I'm going to follow this path. But in order to actually be a sannyasi, there's actually a very, very specific rite of initiation. It's very much like a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah or a communion or any sort of religious ceremony that we have that has a very deep meaning for the individual, but also has a very specific system in which it takes place. And the religious authority, whether it's the rabbi, whether it's the minister, whether it's the priest, or in this case it's the guru, who bestows sannyas. It's a very elaborate rite of passage. But the important parts are really what it symbolizes. And as I said, what it symbolizes is a renunciation of the stuff that most people tend to live for. Sensual pleasures and accumulation of material goods. And so by taking sannyas, what it's saying is, well, okay, that's out. It's not just celibacy as in no sex, but it's also no family. It's no material possessions as in a house or this or that. For me, on a very personal level, I've had people actually say things to me like, well, so what do you do when you need sweaters, for example? Or what do you do if you need a new pair of shoes, if your shoes are old and you're broken? Does the ashram buy you a sweater or buy you shoes? And on a very personal level, for me, well, I came from money. And so when I took sannyas, I, of course, cut myself off from that. But to create a situation where I then have to beg for a sweater or beg for a pair of shoes doesn't make much sense. And so I'm able to buy a sweater, I'm able to buy a pair of shoes, I'm able not to become a burden I'm able to pay for my travel expenses. I'm able to not become a burden on an institution or on society. That being said, that's sort of unusual because typically when people take sannyas, they literally it's nothing anymore, and now whatever they have, they're going to have to beg for. But something about that just didn't feel quite right to me, that I had something. I was going to give it up and then beg somebody else for it. It didn't seem to make sense in my mind. So I'm still able to buy sweaters and shoes and, cover traveling expenses and not have to have a situation where the ashram is covering that. But it's bare necessities. It's what you need to live. It's what you need to be able to serve. But what sannyas is, to me, is more interesting than what it's not. So what we have vowed against. So, as I said, vows of celibacy, vows of simplicity, vows of renunciation. That's the what you give up. But to me, what's more interesting is what you get. What sannyas is about becoming or attaining rather than what it's about relinquishing. And really what it is it's not against sex because sex is bad, or against families because families are bad, or against possessions because possessions are bad, and that somehow not having these things is higher than having them. It's not that. It's relinquishing that because that's what tends to distract us from our spiritual practice. If I'm focused on, did my kid take her sweater to school? Is my husband, did he make his lunch before he walked out the door? Oh, what's going to happen? She's got an exam today. Or, oh my God, he's having lunch with that pretty new secretary today. If you start having these sorts of thoughts and concerns, this is the stuff that disrupts meditation. So here I am sitting to meditate, and my mind is wondering about the pretty new secretary my husband's having lunch with, or how my kid is going to do on an exam, or did they remember to take their sweater, or all of the stuff that being in a family is full of. Not that it's bad, not that it's wrong by any means. And in fact, the scriptures and the teachings are full of stories and emphases on enlightened people, great sages and rishis who were family people, who were married, who had children. But the path of sannyas is a path of spiritual practice above all else. The path of being a householder is really spiritual practice through all else. So how can my marriage, how can my job, how can my family be a way for me to have a spiritual practice? Not how can it be separate, that I've got this really peaceful half an hour in the morning and then the kids wake up. Or I've got this really beautiful prayer time in the morning and then my husband wakes up. Not that. But how can that marriage, how can that family be my spiritual practice? But sannyas is a different path. It's a path that says spiritual practice above all else. So anything that's going to distract me, thwart me, pull me out of that. If I have possessions, I'm worried about losing them. I'm worried about somebody stealing them. If I own things, I'm worried about something happening to them. Whether it's a literal possession of, some jewelry or something, something I might have, or whether it's my money sitting in the stock market. I'm worried, is it going to fall overnight? So suddenly my attention, instead of being on spiritual awakening, is on, oh my God, what happens if the stock market crashes? Oh my God, what happens if there's an earthquake and my house falls? Oh my God, what happens if my child fails her chemistry exam today? What happens if my husband does have lunch with that pretty secretary? And, so I get distracted. So in order to fully immerse in spiritual practice, we remove the rest. So that's what the path of sannyas is. But one last and really important part of that, because people tend to talk a lot about detachment. There's a Sanskrit word, vairagya, which is translated typically as non-attachment or detachment. And it's seen as this great spiritual virtue, and it's associated typically with those who have taken sannyas. We are unattached to things because we've renounced them anyway. But even for people who are not sannyasis, this concept of non-attachment is one that's almost drilled into our head. Thou shalt be non-attached, thou shalt be non-attached. And it seems to me, from what I've seen in my own life and what I've learned and what I've absorbed, is that it's a slight misconception. The non-attachment is not non-attachment to the world. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna explains very, very beautifully, very clearly, and very emphatically how we need to be not attached to the fruits of our labor. I study for an exam, I do my best, I go in, I take it. Now, whether the teacher decides to mark me with a good grade or a bad grade, it's out of my hands. I know I have done my job sincerely. I've really done the best I can. Do I get an A? Do I get a C? Do I fail? I'm not going to be attached to that. I put a lot of time and energy into a project that I believe in. I do my due diligence. I do the work. I do it with sincerity. Is it going to be something that's adopted and, make me a billionaire? Or is it going to be something that's going to sit gathering dust on somebody's table for the next 3 decades? That's not in my hands. And the more I'm attached to the fruits of my labor, the more frustrated and depressed and disappointed we get. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna emphasizes this non-attachment, not to the world, but to the fruits of our labors. So that's aspect one of this non-attachment concept. The other aspect is in general spiritual practice of, you shouldn't be attached to this, you shouldn't be attached to these people, you shouldn't be attached at all. And you start to see almost a condoning or even a revering of indifference, of apathy. And that's not at all what the teachings are. So taking sannyas does not mean that we do our best to be as indifferent as we possibly can, or do our best to be as apathetic as we possibly can, or do our best to be as disconnected from the world as we possibly can. What it is that instead of having one family, one husband, one wife, a couple kids, a couple in-laws, so that all of my attention is focused on 1 or 2 or 3 people. Instead of that, the world becomes my family. So that's a really important difference. It's not I've gone from caring about 5 to caring about none. To I've gone from caring about 5 to I've gone to caring about 5 billion. Or 7 billion if I can get there. So when we talk about renunciation, it's not a removal, a separation, a cutting off from, historically, people will go off into the mountains, live in a cave for a while. You hear a lot of stories. Puja Swamiji lived in the jungles for almost a decade. But that's a charging of the battery, you can say. In all of these stories, they come back full of fire to serve and to help. And Puja Swamiji always speaks about, the Buddha goes out, sits under the Bodhi tree, gets his enlightenment, but then doesn't go deeper into the forest. Rather, he comes back, now to serve. And so that for me is always a really important distinction, is that the renunciation is a renunciation of this very small nuclear circle of care into a a much more global circle of care. It's not a renunciation of care. It's not a detachment from caring. And for me, because I'm a scientist at heart, I learn things still very much by a sort of scientific method. This is what I've seen in the most enlightened masters I've met. They're the least detached, disinterested, apathetic, aloof, disconnected, uncaring. Rather, they're the most connected, most caring, most compassionate, most loving. All of them. And so that's when you realize, oh wait, that's actually the highest goal. It's not cutting myself off, rather it's expanding the circle. And then in terms of the concept of guru and how to explain it, everybody in this world, pretty much, particularly everybody in the Western world, the metropolitan, modern, sophisticated world. I mean, we're not talking about people who are living in villages, because in many cases, although they have much less, they're actually much better off emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. But people who have everything, almost everyone is really deeply looking for something, looking for happiness in some way, looking for peace in some way, looking for fulfillment in some way. And we go from the most shallow level to the, if I just could lose 10 pounds, then everything would be okay, to a deeper level. If I just could find my purpose in life, if I just could meditate more deeply, so it spans the whole spectrum from really superficial to much deeper. But nonetheless, everyone is still in a place of feeling like there's something that still stands between me and the peace I'm searching for, the love I'm searching for, the joy I'm searching for. And the guru is really the one who brings that to you. And the truth is, we call it a guru. So you're going to go around and say, my guru. Your friends will be like, what's that? But every one of them, depending on what it is that's between them and happiness, or them in peace, or them in fulfillment, has some place, or in many cases, many places they go, to try to bridge that chasm. To try to bring what they're looking for into their hands. Again, from the most superficial level of whether it's a gym or a bar or a disco or a brothel, to a yoga class, to a meditation class, to an astrologer. Everybody does something to try to bring closer to them that which they're looking for. And the beautiful thing of having a guru is that regardless of what we're looking for, the guru's going to bring it all there. So for them, they've got to go one place to lose the weight, another place to, dance off their stress, another place to have someone read their palm and tell them, what to major in college. Another place to learn yoga, another place for this. Another person to tell them that, another person to tell this, another one to get advice from over here, another one over there. And with a guru, it's like, one-stop shopping. Whatever's wrong, whatever it is we're yearning for, It's not that the guru, as I always say, it's not that the guru is a vending machine. It's not that you're going to go and say, I want to lose 10 pounds, and the guru is going to say, poof, done. But ultimately, all of that which we want it for one very, very simple reason, which is, it's going to make me happy. If you actually dissect everything that we think we want in the world, and you take yourself layer by layer of why you want it, well, okay, well, so then this, why? Well, so then this, why? Then this, why? It all eventually brings us down to, then I would feel happy. I want to lose 10 pounds, why? Well, then the guy in the office next to me would, look at me. Okay, well, that would make me happy, why? Because then maybe I finally would have a date on Saturday night. Okay, and that would make me happy. Why? Because then I wouldn't be so lonely. And okay, that would make me happy. Why? Because then I would feel more like I existed. And that would make me happy. Why? Because then this hole in the pit of my stomach wouldn't be there. Okay, and that would make me happy. Why? You see, and so you can start at the most superficial of what we think we want. And ultimately it all comes down to, well, I want it because it's going to make me happy. And if we take ourselves even deeper, the happiness takes the form of fullness, enoughness. Well, if I have that, then it would be enough. And whether it's a possession, whether it's a title, whether it's a relationship, all of it becomes about, because then I would be happy. Why? Because then it would feel like enough. I would feel like enough. That little voice in my head that said, you're not enough, would finally shut up. When I compared myself to people around me, I would no longer feel less than. When I compared myself to who I thought I should be, I would no longer feel like a failure. And each of us has, something different, but it's all about, ultimately, whatever I think I want, it's for the happiness, so I feel like enough. I am enough, I have enough, it is enough. And the thing with the guru is, it's not, okay, poof, here's your 10 pounds, poof, here's your, condo in Hawaii. It's, poof, here's your enoughness. Poof, here's your peace, here's your joy. And so suddenly, all of those things that we thought we needed no longer are required. Doesn't mean they're not nice. Doesn't mean that we don't still work for them. But they no longer stand between me and happiness. They no longer stand between me and enoughness. And so, what I would say to friends who ask is, all of the things that I'm yearning for in my life, He's the one who brings them to me. And whether you're religious or not religious, doesn't get much better than that. I mean, we all would love, the equivalent of a drive-through for things other than dinner. And that's really, really the role that the Guru plays for us. And it's not always easy, of course. I frequently share the analogy that being with the Guru feels very much like being the clay on the spinning wheel of the potter, where you get whacked with every turn. And you get dizzy. And then after you've been whacked a bunch, you get thrown in the fire. But ultimately, it's all in the service of taking a lump of clay and turning it into something that's both beautiful and ultimately of some use to someone, whether it's a bowl, whether it's a teacup, whether it's a flower vase, whatever the artist was making. Well, he took that lump of clay and has turned it into something that's exquisite and beneficial, useful to the world. And that's what the Guru does for us. This brings to a close this hour of inspiration and transformation. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad to be together with you all each week. And I look forward to being together again next Thursday, same time, on OMTimes Radio.